I got 702. So, we'll just see how this goes, but it could be 10 minutes. It could be 25. But basically, I wanted to do a little bit of a YouTube live, and we'll keep it, saved as a video for everybody. Welcome. My name's John Sangle. I've got a piece of property that actually measures about 125 acres in Corey, Pennsylvania. And of that, I have about 10 acres in chestnuts. We put our first chestnuts in the ground in 2014. We bought 3 Dunstan chestnuts, branded chestnuts. And then in 2015, I purchased 100 chestnut bare root seedlings from what was previously known as Empire Chestnuts. Now I believe it's known as Route 9 Cooperative in Carrollton, Ohio, from Mr. Greg Miller. I purchased those. There were, I believe, 9 different packages of different mother trees. We knew the mother trees, but not the other side of the parent. So all hybrids, but we put those varieties, and we now have up to 29 varieties of chestnuts in the ground, 29 different varieties. But again, they're all hybrids. So really, in effect, there's about 450 different types of trees. We have 3 grafted trees that I put in that I purchased from Washington Chestnut Company in Washington State. And we got our first chestnut produced from that. It was open pollinated. That was from a Luvol's Monster. And then if you guys follow on the Facebook chestnut page, I believe it's chestnuts as a crop, chestnuts as a Castanea species as a production. J. Michael Nave, he gave me some seeds that I have growing in 2 rows close to each other. They're just in their, I think, 5th year, and they're just now 6, 7, 8 foot tall and starting to produce blossoms. So looking forward to that. So we have about 450 trees spread over 10 acres. About 2/3 of it is planted on a 30-foot by 30-foot spacing. And the other third is on a 15-foot by 15-foot. I did that. The 30-foot by 30-foot spacing was used based on basically what I used as my guideline for how to plant a chestnut orchard. It's produced by the University of Missouri. If you just type in growing chestnuts or how to grow chestnuts or growing chestnuts as a crop, University of Missouri PDF, type that, you'll come up with the most recent PDF. It gives you great information on soil type, pH that they desire, how to plant them, spacing, when to thin them, and so forth. And you can do intensively managed chestnuts. In Japan, they do that to get even bigger seeds. The Castanea crenata does produce a bigger chestnut than even the Chinese chestnut does, but they intensively manage them. They almost look like short peach trees or apple trees, and they get really, really large burrs. But 450 trees, 10 acres, 30 foot by 30 foot for 2/3, 15 foot by 15 foot, knowing that I'm going to have to thin those out, but trying to push production earlier. And I started that in 2015. I planted 100 along with another 100 trees that I grew from seed that were all from Dunstan parents. Again, Dunstans are nothing more than a Chinese hybrid with a little bit of American genetics. They're not 1/16 American. They're a little bit of American that are grown in northern Florida. But I purchased mine from Chestnut Ridge of Pike County in Illinois. I purchased the seeds there and grew those. So I planted 100 bare roots from Greg Miller, what was called Empire Chestnuts, now Route 9 Cooperative. I planted those seedlings, bare root, 1-year-old seedlings, at the same time as I planted trees grown from seed that year. And then I've added to that over the next few years. And now I've just maintained that footprint for about 5 years, and I'm just filling in where trees have died. So I'll catch up on some of the comments here. Forrest Deno says, yes, pure chestnuts. At least that's what they told him when he ordered. Bill Dieter gave me. And then we got Robert V, Michigan, Dunstan and Chinese chestnuts in 5-foot tubes. We got Jason here. Hey, Jason. Have I seen any persimmon out on the farm? Have I thought about growing and selling those? I actually do sell them when I have them. I should have seedlings for sale this spring, a few. But yeah, no, we produced a monster crop this year. I think we had like almost 20 persimmons produced on the one tree. We have about 20 trees coming into production, but of course they're either male or female, and only the one female in the main area where I wanted there to be more females. But she produced for me this year. So they're American persimmons. So if you can reach out to me, around April 15th. That's when I usually sell my bare roots. Seedlings are going in the second and third growing seasons. Looking forward to some growth this year. I'll tell you, if you can get your chestnut seedlings past your first 3 years, you're probably golden. Other than deer damage, bear damage, but disease and not liking soil type. If you can get them past their third year, you're sitting pretty. Have I ever noticed deer eating on my chestnuts? Absolutely. Deer, I had to put tube toppers. If you watch my very early videos, I had 5-foot tubes, but I actually had to put a topper because when those trees were out in the middle of a field and the first one started putting their leaves over the top, it was the deers. They took it as their personal job to eat all the leaves. But they did do. The toppers did a great job, but once we got more of them up past deer browse height, you ever hear diameter at breast height? If you're talking about logging, DBH, I call it deer browse height for chestnuts. But once I got them past DBH, which is above 6 foot here, although this year it probably has to be 7 foot with a permanent foot and a half of snow on the ground. I'm seeing less damage. They'll trim off the tips on the lower branches, but once you get the leader past where they can get to them, you're good. Have I tried germinating in sand yet? I saw you probably were the one commenting to try sand this year, and I just replied earlier today. I can't do sand this year because I've already put them into peat moss, in December and November, but I'll try sand. We'll see how it works. East Jordan, 28 trees and 5-foot tubes. 3 are out of the tubes. I bought those 1 year bare roots, and after one season, they're 5 to 8 inches out of 5-foot tubes. Yep. Well, you've got a great growing situation. Now you got to get them through 2 more winters because voles, if you don't keep all the vegetation away from the roots, and I've talked many times in videos, I don't spray around my trees, mainly I'm not against spraying, but just time. And you don't want to get spray on the young bark because basal bark spraying will kill your trees. I've just as a function of time, I haven't maintained a vegetation free area around the tree, and voles are a real problem. You'll know when your tree doesn't wake up and you look alongside the tree bark won't really have the classic blight. You may be losing bark just like trees do when you're cutting firewood and the bark falls off after a period of time. But you'll see a couple holes along the roots and you'll just lift the tree up and there'll be almost no roots. The voles eat the roots. You get them past the first couple years, you don't have to worry about voles anymore. Joe Sangle touting that he's harvested 200 persimmons from friends' trees and drove down the road throwing them out the windows. And it did work great. He has to mow his persimmons. South Carolina is a little different than Northwest PA. All right. Is it kind of weird? Nobody can talk back. It's all about commenting. So I'm kind of speaking into a vacuum here, but maybe we need to change this someday to some Zoom meeting or something so we can all kind of talk and irritate each other. But anyway, I grew those chestnuts, and if you watch my videos this past year, one of the most significant, I thought I was going to purchase my tractor, the 5065E, the John Deere. When I purchased it in 2018, I thought that was going to be my mowing solution. I have a 6-foot Frontier mower on it, and it worked great. But over the past couple of years, as I go along, that rollover protection bar, I want the branches to start at or above 6 feet. But with that rollover protection bar up, it's catching every branch. And I finally, after you guys made comments, that went with a 0 turn. And I tell you, I only got to mow 3 or 4 times at the end of the season. And now it cut my mowing time in half. It is amazing. I mean, honestly, it's revolutionized my orchard maintenance. Now I can't wait to get out there and mow. So that's how I'm maintaining the orchard now with a 0 turn. I have a 72-inch John Deere Z930 gas engine. It's the best purchase I've made for the chestnuts since starting. The tractor will still work out way away from the branches, but honestly, I don't even know if I'm going to use it for that. And then you saw that I put in a video recently that I purchased a skid steer. I'm going to be able to really get the roads going up to my chestnut orchard, because there's a pretty significant ridge on the front of the farm, and the roads do get erosion, and I'm going to be using that over the next year. So once the snow disappears from out here and dries out a little, you're going to see some skid steer action. I can't wait to get that out there. Forrest, do I have any faith in blight-resistant American chestnut? If it's pure American, I have no faith, no confidence, and no faith, unless you're living west of the Rockies. I think you're going to be fighting a losing game, but kudos to you, and I'd love to be wrong. But we haven't found one yet that has it. It's just a fatal flaw, and it'll grow 7 or 8 years amazingly, and then it'll die. But you may get a few nuts out of it. But that's why I went with Chinese-based primary. I do have plenty of American genetics, and occasionally I get a tree with a ton of vertical growth, which I have to believe is the American piece rearing its head. But until there's a GMO or some significant advances in the hybrid that they're trying to grow, I don't have faith or confidence in a pure American. The pure American was not better tasting than the European. It's a much smaller nut. And while I definitely would love to have a native tree growing, I'm trying to produce a product that's sellable and preferred by wildlife. I'm telling you, I'm not going to put a fence up. I've already decided that. Maybe at some point in time I will, but I want to share with the wildlife. And this year I shared unwillingly that the deer have figured out what the chestnuts are. And so I got a lot of empty shells. How am I going to handle the production volume when that happens? Well, I'm working with a chestnut harvester company and trying to convince them that there's a reason to come east. They only have their product. They're Italian, and I have had preliminary conversations with them. A and B Roussette. They want me to pay $100,000 to get a piece of equipment over here. I want to maybe rent it for a price or do a demo out here. And the problem is we just don't have a significant number of people with acreage of mature trees for them. But I'm still working with them. If anybody has a connection, I'm happy to demo something. But we're going to do that and reach out to other regional producers and see what we can come up with. Instead of 5 or 6 foot pine stakes, buy 10-foot half-inch conduit cut in half for tree tubes. Saves over the half the price. It does save half the price. I hate it. I hate conduit. I use conduit. It heaves. Water gets in it, so you better plug the top. Otherwise, water is going to get down it. And when you come out at the end of the winter, if you live in a cold environment anyway, your trees are all going to be leaning. Constantly found myself having to pound them back in. I hated that. I like rebar better. It's cheaper too, and if you go to a local hardware store, they'll usually cut it into your 5-foot sections for you. You don't get the flexing, but if you've watched my video, my 10 years of experience of chestnut, I tubes definitely have a role. They're very quick, efficient. They do some protection, especially from rabbits, uh, but they can be a haven for voles, and you can get a greenhouse effect and get early frost kill if you get a late Mother's Day frost. But I'm going more towards cages, but that just takes time. It takes a lot longer time to snip and cut through cages and all that kind of stuff, but you get a much sturdier tree, and you don't have this little haven where voles can sit there and munch on their tree roots for the first couple years. I try to mulch my trees so I can mow further from the base. Again, if I didn't have 4 kids and time crunched, I would definitely be mulching somewhat. I've seen some people put rocks around the base. I don't know what the right answer is. I would love to just be able to put down a spray that will keep the stuff away, and I think over time I could, but it's just the trees seem to be doing okay, and I'm getting a foot. I was in that research, I believe, in that PDF that I talked about from the University of Missouri. If you can get about a foot to a foot and a half of growth, 12 inches to 18 inches of growth every year, you're doing good. I'm getting that growth, so I'm not going to be doing significant changes on that. But I think you will get increased production or growth if you control that, and you'll get less death from voles because they're eating the grass roots too. In your walking through the orchard video a few weeks ago, what ended up being the small tracks, mouse, chipmunk, or ferret? I don't know. I got lots of ideas from people, but I have no idea. I think chipmunks uh, hibernate, unless if someone can correct me. But it could definitely be weasel. It could definitely be a mouse. Those are definitely out there. Voles, I guess. I don't know, but they were everywhere in that one area. But don't have them on trail camera. Have you started any chestnut seeds inside? I have not. I'm not starting chestnut seeds indoors. I used to start them in early February, and it was nice seeing green, but they become leggy and unwieldy and a pain in the butt by the time you get to May. And so now I don't start until mid-April and get them started and then take them outside. They harden off much easier. If you start them in early February and you're like me, where the last frost is mid-late May, hardening off after that means you're going to be carrying trees in and out on the days that the frost shows up, and that's a pain. And you're going to have to harden them in a shaded area for like a month, and at a minimum. If you try to do it in 2 weeks, you're going to get fried trees. So I haven't started indoors, but early mid-April, I'll be putting them in the ground or in some soil. I ordered seed from Chestnut Ridge of Pike County in the fall. I immediately put them in a container with damp peat, and into the fridge. How long should it take them for them to sprout? If you check them now, you'll probably start seeing a little bit of a root radical. You should pretty soon, as long as it's not too damp. Otherwise, you're going to have mold. Any thoughts about grafting? Grafting is an interesting thing. Some orchards do that a lot, especially out west, because then you can get a single variety and harvest all within like a week. You dump most of your chestnuts. There's also, in some parts of the world, in the Middle East, for example, they do grafting on oak to try to get by with another pest that they have over there. They're not long lived. And grafting, I took my advice from Dr. Greg Miller in Ohio on this. He said that there's sudden graft failure. And if you follow, maybe it's Michigan chestnut growers, they have pure European chestnuts, Colossal and Bouche de Bézizac. They produce Colossal. That's their chestnut. Bouche de Bézizac is the pollen producer. One of their orchards had huge amount of sudden graft failure, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Beautiful trees, probably 15, 20-year-old trees. and they all died. And that's what Dr. Miller had said, that grafted trees in the north, when exposed to extreme cold, are subject to sudden graft failure. The tree looks beautiful. You don't see any bulging of the graft. It doesn't appear that the graft has a problem, and the tree suddenly dies. And they had a huge amount of death in one of their orchards. So I have not given a lot of thought, but I do have 3 grafted trees. They're still alive. My planter tree tubes have done well. As the older trees put on girth, the trees tubes perforation worked perfectly. Planter tree tubes are quality, but they priced me out a long time ago. They were very expensive, and I went to Tree Pro tree tubes. I've got some props here. The Tree Pro tree tube is made out of old milk containers, and as much as I hate it, and my twin brother Joe, who's on here commenting, he went to Purdue, I went to IU. IU did win tonight, by the way, against Purdue, just in case Joe was missing on that. We got this tree tube. It comes with releasable zip ties. It's got air holes, and this is actually the top with the air holes, and then the bottom is solid, so you could spray in that area. And that's a 5-foot. It has a pre-built perforation, maybe not perfectly clear, but you can see this. So this is what I use for my tree tubes, with a 5-foot treated pine stake, and much more reasonably priced. But again, trying to get away from that and go more to cages. Did I get any persimmons this year? Yep. Got about 20 persimmon, 30 persimmon this year. Did I get them? I just left them on the tree and let them all drop, because I get like that. You know, they become, the American persimmon needs to be close to freezing. I don't think it has to frost exactly to be tasty, and loses its stringency. By that time, I'm hunting, and I don't want to be leaving my scent out where my trees are. I don't know if that's dumb, but Rich says, I have seeds in tree pots. It creates in crates already under grow lights and natural light through our garage door. I have them close enough to keep them from getting leggy. Rookie. Okay. I don't know if he's calling me a rookie or saying he's a rookie, Rich, but hey, listen, you can definitely do it. I've grown hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trees that way, and it's fine, but they will be a little leggy if you've got all right, Rich says he's the rookie. Well, I'm still kind of a rookie too. I started sharing this 10 years ago or so because there was really no chestnut content. But yeah, that should be a great plan, as long as, you know, you're able to. I don't know when your last frost date is, but if it's early April or mid-April, you're probably going to be fine. But really take care when you harden them off. You cannot take them out and immediately put them in soil and let them get 10 hours of direct sunlight. You will fry the leaves. They may survive, but many will not. So you got to put them in an area that gets like 3 or 4 hours of sun maximum, preferably just morning, and then the whole afternoon they can be in the shade and get used to the natural winds. And then you got to make sure you water them every 3 or 4 days without overdoing it. And then after about a month of that, you can gradually move them to a little more sun. But even at the month, I wouldn't have them in full sun for long periods of time, 4 to 6 hours, and then you can plant them somewhere. I do have some props here behind me. I don't know. Do you guys watch the most recent video with my 4 things I always have in the orchard? Do you guys have anything to add to that? Things you always carry. The next one's going to be coming out about my favorite pots, but we can discuss. So you can grow chestnuts in anything. Yes, you should be excited to see chestnuts grow. It's awesome to see green when everything else sucks outside. Sunscreen, that's a great call, because I got my first thing frozen off of this ear last summer, and I anticipate getting more things frozen and gradually trimming my ears down to nothing. I'm starting to wear hats with much wider brims, but sunscreen is a great call. Batteries, absolutely. I should invest in a battery company. I've done solar batteries. I've got a battery pack that I use that has a solar that has a bigger battery that I can put on the ground. It does pretty good. This is just a simple plant container. You can go chestnuts in this, get them started. But again, chestnuts are a member of the beech family, beech, oak, red oak, and chestnuts. They all want a long taproot. So look, next Friday, you'll see a video, but this is the D pot, D40L, put out by Stewie. It's about a 2.5 inch by 10 inch. This can get you through 3-4 months of growth before it gets fully down. You may even be able to squeak a season out of them and plant them in the fall if you really watch them. But they air prune a little. They got this holder that you can see here. They've actually upgraded the holder. And when I publish on Friday, you'll see links on Amazon. You don't have to buy from Amazon, but that's good. Then this one down here, you can barely see. It's my favorite, the SC7 cone containers, spelled like cone. I love this, but you can only get about 2.5 months out of this. But this is real handy, cheap, and I can sell it and just give it to people. But I prefer now selling trees that have hardened off. And the tree pot, 3x8, 3 inch by 3 inch by 8 inches, is another one, but it takes a lot more potting mix. But you can move it easily in this holder so you can grow them at scale, get a lot of them. Tactical 5.11 pants to carry gear. I like that. Batteries for trail cams, always in my pack. Case for SD cards. Got to have your SD cards, but not necessarily in the chestnuts. I will plant all seeds outside this year in air prune beds, all caged. You guys saw my failure at the air pruning. Got in a battle with a guy, said I had 2 inches of soil. Well, inside there, I had them all in this 3x8 inch. So they all had definitely 8 inches of soil. But you must have a plan for your air pruning beds to be lowered to the ground. And I didn't have that. I needed to build it with removable legs, and I didn't. So my air pruning bed sucked. But if you can keep them close and maintain them, that's great. And I really enjoy planting my seeds outdoors as long as you can protect them. I grow them with a 1/2 inch hardware cloth. I don't know why it's called cloth, but if you know hardware cloth, I'm sure all of you do. But it's a metal, galvanized metal cage. And I build cages so keeping mice out, you got to keep the rodents out. Otherwise, they will wreak havoc on your nuts, which is a big problem. You don't need things wreaking havoc with your nuts. And you plant those inside protected cages in deep soil, 8, 10, 12 inches of soil. You can get really good seedlings. You've seen me produce this before, but when I put mine outdoors, I let them sprout. I plant them in early May, about 3 weeks before the end of last frost. And then usually in mid-July, they require one weeding. They've gotten rooted enough that when I pull a weed next to them, they're not pulling up. And then by that time, the leaves shade out, and that's the last time I have to weed them. And then I grow them 1 or 2 years and can sell them as a bare root seedling on tax day. I will plant all in air prune beds. Rich says I have 50 and 3x8s and 95 and 4x12s. So you can keep those definitely for a year in those. I've talked about protecting the chestnuts before in the winter. If you have them on the ground, touching the ground, you just have to bank dirt up against them. 6 to 8 inches of dirt to the side of the outermost container that you have. And then you can throw some leaves over them if you want. But as long as you have the sides protected and they're touching the earth, that there's no air coming underneath the roots to freeze them, they'll handle cold temperatures. Our low temperature here this year has been -18 that I've seen. And the lowest temperature my trees have survived was -28 Fahrenheit, -28. Dan Smith, I switched to 2x4 welded steel fencing like I used. Much happier, and the Dunstans are growing like crazy compared to all others in Southeast Michigan. Also added the 12-foot 12-inch high, 12-foot high garden cloth mini cage around the trunks for mice proofing. I'm going to say that's 12-inch high garden cloth mini cage. I'd have to look at that. That's probably that real fine mesh like screening to keep the mice off of them. That's probably, I'm sure that's going to be very helpful. Yeah. Inch. I'm seeing significantly improved. So the first time I decided to try a cage, I had a real spindly seedling, because those, if you need to get a tree above deer browse height, which is a big problem in a lot of the areas, the tubes will get them there quicker, no doubt. They'll grow taller quicker. But it was so spindly that the side of the tree tube was rubbing the tree raw, which, if you're in a blight infested area, which if you lived in the East Coast, especially Ohio and Eastern, Missouri may have a little less pressure, even though it's still there. Iowa, even less pressure, but it's still there. Unless you're west of the Rockies, you're going to have blight pressure of some level. But when I put a tree, just a cage that I cut 36 inches of the 2-inch by 4-inch galvanized metal, 5-foot tall fence, and put it around 36 inches, makes a 12-inch circle. That tree is so much more robust now. I mean, after a couple years, it is just it doesn't have the lean like the Lake Erie chestnuts thing have that lean from that western wind. All right, I'm going to give it about 15 more minutes here. Rich says, I'm keeping the temp at 68. It's a heated floor pole barn home in the garage side. I think 68 is going to be fine. It'll actually slow down your growth a little, which you probably want. That way, they're not just going crazy. Just make sure they sprout. If you start noticing they sprout and then you get 6, 7 other little tiny sprouts and they all look like they're just not opening their leaves, they look brownish on the end. It may be that it's too cold and you're getting something called damping off, which is a little poorly understood, but cold and damp both contribute to damping off. So if you get 2 or 3 trees growing really well, but the majority are doing that multiple little stem thing, look up damping off, DAMPING, in my thing. It's a tough problem to deal with, and it may be related to being too cold. But 68 should be okay. M32 Outdoors, 2 of my 5-foot tubes. Top of them, I added 24-inch hardware cloth and zip tied it down 6 to 12 inches down the tube. So with the hardware cloth, gives it 6-foot deer browse height. That's good. After 1 season growing from seeds, what can I do to keep alive in large 3-gallon pots? I guess I would ask you first, what's your goal? Is it you want to get them bigger before you take them out to their final destination, or do you want to grow them in the 3-gallon pot? If you're growing them in the 3-gallon pot just to kind of grow, I guess I would put them somewhere where they get a lot of sun, but maybe get protected from the top 2 hottest hours. Make sure you water them every so often. That Mr. Nave, who has been a real source of knowledge for me, grow in California, especially grew trees very successfully in pots. Bigger before planting on the property and to sell the trees. Yeah, I mean, you may want to set up drip tubing if you're going to keep them in 3-gallon pots. I mean, that's going to be a huge tree. I don't know if you saw at the beginning of last year, I actually had some 3-year chestnut trees that got overgrown, and just due to time commitments, wasn't able to get them dug in time for bare root. And then they just kept growing. They were 6 foot tall. They had big old roots. I actually bare root planted those last year. It's the video where I'm holding it up. I forget exactly what that was called, but I planted that. And as bare root, I planted them in bare root in late April last year, and those things took off. They bloomed, and they look good. But I'll withhold judgment on how successful that was until I see if they wake up this spring. Yeah, I mean, this is a key point that I have found. 1-year bare root trees do well when you transplant them. 2-year bare roots seem like they're doing a touch better, but they cost more money. They take longer time for them to somebody produce that. But I feel like it just has a little bit of a head start on getting out of the tree tube. But I can't say that 3 years better than 2. Eventually, there's a point where bare root trees, the younger, you don't want to be doing a 6-year bare root tree. That tree will be probably struggle just from the shock. Rich says they're all sprouting for the most part. I didn't pull them out of the fridge unless they had a decent taproot. I do have a few that are black at the tip, but most are looking good. My tip, the main tip I have out of all that video of mine called Damping Off is if they got a black tip, completely stop watering that tree. That's the only way I've been able to find them. Other people have talked about all sorts of things that I would basically call homeopathic or waving crystals potentially. I'm not saying they're wrong. It just doesn't, various seasonings and spices and so forth may work, but complete and utterly stop watering a tree if it's black and looks like it's not opening a leaf and it's sending multiple little sprouts up from where that root radical goes down. Completely stop watering it, let it dry out completely, and do not give it water until it has a leaf open, not sort of open, but a leaf open. If it does that, you can start watering again and you've saved that tree. If you try to water it when you start to see a leaf opening, it will immediately wrinkle up that leaf and it will be dead. Or it'll just sit there and send tiny little nubbins off of the root radical. Damping off is very frustrating. It's mostly related. Maybe it's fungal. We're not sure, but it's related to cold, damp, and 68's just a touch low, not terrible. And if you got good growth going, I think you're going to be fine, especially if it's a little warmer during the day when you have natural sun. All right. You guys want to talk about some of the other stuff? We're talking about chestnut. Feel free to ask more questions. This is the bad luck buck this year. Pretty cool antlers, don't you think? What do you guys think of that hunt? Look at this. This is 2 years in a row. I've got a buck with a history of a bot fly there. Decent little buck. Cool looking antlers. And we can throw some other questions at you. The biggest buck I've ever gotten, it's hard to show you, but if you look up giant 12-point buck on my page, I shot him on camera, and I had a fair amount of shaky footage. I've got a much better camera these days, but back then it auto focused and it would focus on everything but the buck. But giant 12-point buck, he measured 146 and a half, I think. That's the biggest buck I ever gotten. That was his rough, his gross, and I think he came in right at 140 net. Very symmetric 12-pointer, which in Pennsylvania where I hunt, that's a tough one. Josh, thanks for the great buck. Hope I get to see you when I am down there here shortly. Going to be on a plane. Hopefully it lands right side up. Or if it lands upside down, I'll take the same outcome as those guys had. I don't want to meet a helicopter up close. I've been on military helicopters and I've been on regular planes, but I don't want to be on them both at the same time. Dan, you're more than welcome. Hey, listen, when I started doing this, we had no success. I honestly, there was like 2 videos about chestnuts, and so I decided I was going to start sharing this information. How dry can you let the pots get, and for how long? I water them. I use 3 or 4 days, but I would not water any tree unless the top surface of the soil is crumbly. You like touch it and it seems like it should have been watered yesterday or the day before. They are just ultra sensitive to too much watering. So I would, especially in a cooler temperature, if you're keeping it 78 degrees, you can probably water them a little more frequently because they're going to dry out more frequently. But cooler, maybe once a week. Other than maybe Route 9, do you have the biggest orchard in northern Midwest? If you consider Michigan, no, there's much bigger, and they have much bigger ones, and they have a cooperative, so they have equipment and everything like that. I actually don't know, but 10 contiguous acres is approaching one of the bigger ones. I'm looking to potentially expand that, but I don't know that. That's a good question. Think of all the chestnuts you saved. I've saved a bunch of chestnuts, uh, and then I've donated a bunch to wildlife, especially this past year. Jason, do you have any developed plan for herd management with regard to the chestnuts? Target herd size through doe take? Well, we need to. I need to. I've got a doe factory, and despite all of my does seeming to have ugly doe syndrome, UDS, where no bucks are following them, at some point in time they must be meeting some, or I got a bunch of miracles of nature because they all seem to have 2 and 3 fawns and they're all female. But I don't have a particular plan. I don't know. I need to shoot more does, no doubt about it. I'm gonna let's see. Jeremy Biller. I planted 100 trees last year in West Virginia. Planting 400 this year. Learned everything from you. Thanks. You're welcome, Jeremy. That's awesome to hear. But 400. That's a lot. I did find. I don't know if you. My very first video, I did a terrible job of showing how I planted them. I started with a one-man auger, and I'll be honest with you, a shovel works faster. I can dig, and I'm not digging a huge 3-foot section, and you will get better growth if you go through and rip it or plow it, and then break it up and then dig and put them in. Which I did show a video. I did 2 rows doing that, but uh, shovel was my most effective way to plant, and 400 is a lot. But I would not do a dibble bar like I've planted oaks and so forth, where you just shove it in, lean it forward, and then put the seedling in the bare root, and then put a hole behind it and push the dirt against it. That works great for, well, I would say it works okay for oaks and so forth, but I wouldn't do it for chestnuts. Wayland Legend, if you started over, what spacing would I do? I'd keep the 30-foot by 30-foot. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with the 15-foot by 15-foot, but I'm going to have to cut some nice trees at about the 10, 12-year mark, and it's going to hurt me. But they produce on their outer branches. So I thought about when I get to the 15-year mark and I got to cut, maybe try some of the intensive pruning just to make them look like some of those Japanese trees, and see if I can get less chestnuts on those trees, but bigger nuts. I hear chestnuts like being planted on hills and slopes. Well, that's what the recommendation was to me, to do that. And I'll tell you, my trees that are on the ridge are much happier and much bigger than the ones that are on the slope. I don't know why that is, but they are. I know that I got a diagonal where the soil changes, and where you go to a more water holding soil, they're not as happy, but the ridge top, they are happy. I've received grants from Fish and Wildlife plus Michigan DNR for land restoration and wildlife. We have 51 acres we're going through and pulling invasive plants and trees. That's a heavy task load, but I love it. I know you do too. It's any minute that I'm out messing with trees and, you know, bending it a little bit to my will, but just making it a better place for nature and for me and for everybody else that's going to come after me long after I'm done. I love it. Benny J, my best trees are on slopes. Mine are on the top of the slope, on the ridge and just on the shoulders. Down deeper, not quite as good, but they're all still happy. 4 acres with a wildflower pollination mix. That's awesome. I've thought about doing that. Rich, if you got a source for where you're buying your mix, 4 acres of wildflower seed is a big order if you're just buying the Walmart 50-cent packages. If you have if maybe you're getting a grant for that, but I love that. Hey, I wanted to take it just a second. I know we're all chestnut primarily here, but last year I kind of evolved out the channel a little and kind of brought you into me developing a lot, a 10-acre lot, and building a road to nowhere and spending endless amounts of cash, and then building a pole barn on that, which I've been currently wiring. Uh, what do you guys think of that? You want to see more of that? I'm thinking about putting the skid steer on there. Anytime you guys can give feedback on content that you like to see more, I like that. Of course, the view count tells me, but if you have any of that ideas or thoughts on adding that newer content, let me know. Green cover is good seed. I saw that Dr. Grant Woods was kind of switched over to green cover from Eagle Seeds. I'll have to give them a look. More important, John McInerney. More important to plant for sun exposure. East slopes is great for that. Yes, you get early sun there. Dusty Bowhunter, how often should I water my 2-year-old chestnuts during the summer? Tell me where you live, Dusty. If you live in Pennsylvania, you probably never need to water them unless you've gone a month without water. Probably never. It would be my answer if they're 2 years old. If they're very first year that you planted them and it's gone 2 to 3 weeks without rain and it's been hot, then water them. No more than once a week, even if you're in Texas. M32 Outdoors responding back to, I'm looking to see what he's, other than the Route 9, the biggest orchard. It involves everything orchard. Everything orchard. I'll have to see. Jason, love the varied content. Love it. Hopefully your farm, I hope you're enjoying that new farm. I know you are. I don't know. I don't know if you got a buck this year. Post if you did. Rich says Fish and Wildlife's taking care of that, and they said they would basically plant wherever we want it. I have a large marsh. We'd like to get rid of the invasives there. Dusty's in West Virginia. You know, I'm going to go with, if it's been 3 to 4 weeks and it's been in the high 80s, low 90s, and you've had no rain, you can water them. Otherwise, I wouldn't water them. And if it's their second year in the ground, I wouldn't water them. Trees got to survive. You got to figure out if they're going to make it or not. And they'll make it. They don't mind being dry like that. If you're in Texas and you're getting 110 degrees, that's a different story. Different problems. Jeremy Biller, how many pounds of nuts did I get last year? I didn't weigh them all, but I'd say about 250 pounds. I sold some. The prices were high. I apologize for that. I've got a shipping code now, so it's a lot cheaper. And on top of that, I'm really going to try to get the price down. I'd like to see you trial chestnut harvesting equipment if I get the chance. I really want to do that too. I want chestnut harvesting and chestnut processing equipment. Anybody has a link, get them in touch with me. I will do it. I don't need much. I just want the equipment. I'll show it. I'll even keep my fees less than $100,000 a week. Yeah, I got a quote on a house on that lot, that 10-acre lot. So let's put it this way. You guys need to go get about 1.5 million of your friends if I'm going to be building anytime soon. I suddenly fell in love with my current house. Fred Rao, any suggestion what to do with 10-year-old chestnut trees? They got rubbed hard by a deer this year. I don't think there's anything you can do. If it starts showing signs of blight, you can try a mud pack. That's what they used to do. Rub it, put dirt on it, and you can look that up, chestnut mud packing for blight. But otherwise, a 10-year-old tree is probably going to survive it. Jason, I did get a buck, but not at that particular property. They got EHD. Finding a bunch dead by his pond. I wondered if we had EHD. We had a low number of bucks on my cameras this year compared to others, but it was a bad year to be a 3-year-old buck on my property this year, and it wasn't EHD. It was all my buddies and me. We are on the chestnut protection prowl. Have you figured out a large sous vide system for nuts with weevil? Now, I got one nut that I believed I had weevil, and I was certain that that nut was from my orchard, but I've had no others in 2 more years. So, but the deer were tearing up nuts. I don't have squirrels moving in yet, but I'm expecting them next. It's going to be impossible. I'll have to get a sprayer that sprays up, and you have to do 2 sprays about 3 weeks apart. Um, I have a sous vide system, but not a large one. Um, and I do have a large one sorted out with a buddy of mine who basically should have been an engineer, but we'll debut that. I don't know that I'll have it out yet this fall. Do I ever plant food plots? Dusty Bowhunter, you need to watch some of my channels. Definitely, I do food plots, and another sister channel that I run called Deer Addiction. It's all one word, Deer Addiction. I had an awesome fall plots this year, awesome, and I put an electric fence up, and put it up too late to save the corn. It's going to be up early this year to try to save some corn, but ridiculous fall food plots. Rich says we built about 2 years ago and it's pricey, but don't feel like it's getting any cheaper, but we can keep our fingers crossed. Well, you already got it built, and interest rates, I don't know if they're going lower or not. Maybe this is the new steady state, but if you're already there, unless you're fortunate and have set yourself up financially that you have no mortgage, if you do have a mortgage, if the rate drops, the house is already built, the cost is known, and you can refi. I haven't seen any EHD Southwest Pennsylvania. That's great. I never found a dead buck that wasn't suffering from lead or copper poisoning. So as far as I know, we didn't get any EHD where I'm at. Rich says we didn't finish everything we wanted because of cost, but we're working on projects as the budget allows. See, that's wise. Let that budget dictate. Josh Friss says videos on pole barn projects, skid steer, equipment, wildlife habitat would be great. Keep up the great videos. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Dusty Bowhunter, we'll check your other channel out. I'm obsessed with hunting. Well, I publish plenty of deer videos here, and then as they age out here, I've been reposting them over there. I don't know. And then I post some new content I posted new content on the electric food plot, electric fence with the food plot, and also my borderline this year. I did border mix, and it was awesome using my Tar River DRL 072. That was a great addition to my planting. Get myself a little more light here. All right, I'm going to do 10 more minutes. 5 more minutes. That'll get us to an hour. We got in before it got crazy. Well, it's crazy. Chris Dyer, hey, Airborne. Airborne salute. The Airborne. Drive on. Have you seen a bigger production value based on tree type? Or has spacing been a bigger production influence so far? I have seen earlier production from a couple of the trees. Perry and Payne were the mother trees, but again, these are hybrids, but that seems to be pretty universal. I planted those when I got 10 bare roots, and they were all from the same mother tree. And Qing, Qing. Perry, Payne, and Qing have been my earliest producers and my biggest producers. Some of those are producing 300, 350 nuts a piece, a lot. And if you saw, some of them produced a purple nut, a couple different trees, but I don't know if I'm going to have to name them, because the name is often it is a grafted tree that's gone through the process of getting named. And basically I may just have to name it A1, or row B3, and then come up with some clever name. Last year was the first year I got chestnuts on my I got chestnuts on my Chinese chestnut trees from Greg Miller. However, they were tiny nuts. Andy, if you let me know if the nuts were wrinkly and tiny, I would say the size of a thumbnail, that means they were not fertilized. If they were plump and round, and small, it may be that it was a first production, but I bet this was a unfertilized. Did I plant giant miscanthus? So I was going to plant giant miscanthus and buy rhizomes for that. I did not. I did plant some switchgrass. We'll see if it grows. It was also planted along with the mix that really grew tall. But I do have one area that I planted in really poor soil. And my understanding is that switchgrass takes about 3 years to really get going. And I do have good weed control, mainly because the soil sucks so bad. But I hear that switchgrass doesn't really mind poor soil. So it's got its first year in the ground. It was supposedly already winterized or hardened off, as we call our, not hardened off, but cold stratified. But I don't know. The next 2 years, I'll be able to tell you, did the switchgrass work, but I did not do giant miscanthus. Purple rain. I like that name. Purple rain for the tree that had the purplish nuts. It's raining nuts. I like it. I'm all about corny there, or being nutty, whatever we're supposed to say. Have I seen the November drop chestnuts being sold? Any truth to this, or do you think it's marketing? I don't know. I got some that hold late, and maybe even into early November. But if it's not a grafted tree, they cannot make a guarantee, and I guarantee it's not going to be a grafted tree. I can almost guarantee that it isn't. And if it is a grafted tree, you may get it to grow great for 10 to 15 years, and then it suffers from sudden graft failure. If you're north of Carolina, your trees are going to produce between mid-September through October. And if you're buying seedling trees, there's just no way you're going to know. So plant a cluster of them, plant 10, 11, 12 of them, and somewhere where you can put a bow stand nearby, because there's probably not going to be any chestnuts left for rifle season if you're up where I'm at, because our rifle season's not till after Thanksgiving. If your rifle season's October 11th, like in South Carolina, probably going to be able to hunt over some chestnuts, but they'll be fighting between persimmons and chestnuts. Do I plant other trees that aren't chestnuts? I tried sawtooth oaks last fall, Dusty Bowhunter says. Yep. I've got white oaks. I sell English white oaks. I love English white oaks. They're incredible. They're producing acorns. They were supposed to at the 7th year. They started producing in their 8th year because we had it used to be the gypsy moth. Now it's been renamed the spongy moth. And they kind of take care of themselves. But for 2 years, it just completely defoliated the tree. So set them back, but they're producing. The tree tube company is Tree Pro. And I don't know if I finished that. They're made by people that graduated from Purdue, as much as I hate to say it. Great product. Tell them Lake Erie Chestnut sent you. They also sell chestnut seedlings these days too, I think. I think they do. They were. But coming up, there's going to be a little bit of a South Carolina bent. We did finish our logging project in the late summer last year. Now we're working through the process of getting that replanted, working with a forester and with the state on that. I'm going to be using a drone. Didn't spend an arm and a leg, because the last one I flew, the first time it flew away and never came back. So hopefully I have better luck with this one. So we'll get some better footage as we fly that up. We're going to be working down in South Carolina on a little kind of temporary shelter, trapping, hunting cabin. There's going to be a Africa hunt coming up, also with not just hunting, but also going through national parks and doing a safari and exploring some European countries, London, England, and going to South Africa and some other areas of Southwestern Africa. And Well, that's what's coming up. So there's going to be spring food plots, chestnuts, finishing up the internal building on the doing electric and finishing up some stuff there, uh, redoing some roads and fixing some stuff up out at the farmhouse. Hoping to redo the inside of the farmhouse and take you along with that. Going to put all knotty pine inside. So that's what we're coming up in this year. I appreciate you guys all joining with me. If you have any other questions, you can pop some more questions in here. But I'm gonna kill the stream now. I really appreciate all of you joining with me. It was great interacting with you. We'll have to set something up here. Maybe we'll get a giant Zoom going on. But I appreciate you all joining with me. Have a great Sunday. Have a better week. Remember, like guys and gals, if you're not out there growing, you're dying. We'll catch you on the next one.